live. We're going to talk about respect for, well, last week we talked about respect for peers, property, and nature. No. Last week we talked about respect for authority and parents. This week we're going to talk about respect for age. And next week we're going to talk about respect for peers, property, and nature. So we're talking about respect for age. And this is something that some cultures don't necessarily practice. But I think that Americans traditionally practice respect for age, but that it's a lost form. How many of you were taught that if someone older than you comes along, you should stand up and greet them?
Pretty sure I was taught that, but I know I did do that.
It's something that has been kind of like lost. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that if you don't stand up when someone walks into the room that you're being rude. But I do think it's interesting that the Bible does say that we should stand when a gray-headed person comes in the room, or an older person comes in the room, that we should stand to greet them. I mean, it's actually a passage in the Bible that says we should do that. So, I know that when you do greet someone, they're older or they are in a position of authority, or even just out of kindness, that your visit with them will go better. And so here's a book by Dale Carnegie. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Anybody ever read this? I recommend that you do. It's a self-help book to help you be more successful. And what it talks about is how to win friends and influence people. You might think, well, I'm not trying to influence people and I've got enough friends. But the reality is that all day long we're expressing our preferences in life. Right? We are. And we want people to we really want people to do what we want them to do. But unless we approach it the right way, it often causes conflict. So here we look at one of the ways that will reduce conflict for our children, and that is to show respect for age. Okay, so on page 99, the scripture says in Leviticus 19, verse 32, "Thou shalt rise up before the gray-headed and honor the aged one, and you shall revere your God. I am the Lord." Now, a literal rendering of this verse would say, "In the face of gray hairs you shall rise, and you shall honor the face of the old man, and thus. So, quite literally, when we show respect for old people, we are demonstrating our fear and respect for God. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Okay. For wisdom is with the aged man, longer life is with understanding. Every virtuous act towards age is credited as a virtuous act toward God. Ah, wow. So, here's some basics. Offering your chair to the elderly. Open the door. Honoring age at buffet lines or you know, it's interesting because a lot of times, like at potlucks or whatever, it's like we just want to run the kids through first so that they can get their food and get settled, and I understand that. But what if we said, hey, let's let everybody that's 60 and over go through first, and then we'll feed the kids. There would be a certain honoring that would go on, that would be in that.
And people care for hot food. Kids don't care.
Yeah.
Here's another thought. How about when kids are running around in the foyer or in the auditorium, especially after church, and the old folks are just trying to get out of the door without being knocked over, you know, shoestring tackled. So it actually is honoring God, elders, by saying, oh, I should be careful. And as parents, we have a responsibility to teach them that. Okay, what is the biblical justification for not spitting on the sidewalk or chewing like a barn animal? Love is not rude. And be what to all men? Courteous to all men. Now, here's where you could come into maybe some conflict with the particular illustrations in this book. Maybe what you consider rude would be different than what another person would consider rude. Now, the Bible does give us some specifics, like to stand in the presence of an older person. But oftentimes, the way that you might demonstrate courtesy would be different than how I might demonstrate courtesy. So the issue is not to tell kids, you know, you have to shake hands when you meet, because that's being courteous, and if people don't shake somebody's hand, they're being discourteous. No, it's when we meet someone, we want to be courteous. And one way to demonstrate that courtesy is to shake their hand. You see what the difference is? The shaking of the hand is not courtesy in itself. It's a demonstration of courtesy. When someone speaks to you, it's courteous to respond. It demonstrates courtesy. Does that make sense? Okay. So the reason that I'm making it a big point is because whether or not your kid spits on the sidewalk may or may not be rude, depending on which sidewalk and who he's with or who she's with. you know. Um, at my house, if a kid spits on the sidewalk, I probably wouldn't think that was terribly rude. Or on the lawn, you know. But on the other hand, if they spit on the front sidewalk at the church, that would be rude. So what we have to teach our children then is not a specific list of these are what are right and this. What we have to do is teach them the principle of courtesy. To think about how ought I to behave in the setting, a particular setting that I'm in. All right. So chewing skull would maybe not be rude, but Copenhagen is, by all means. Because you could probably stand to swallow skull, but I doubt if you could stand and swallow Copenhagen. All right. What's that? You would rather swallow Copenhagen than skull? Oh, I don't know enough about it. I've not swallowed either of them, but I'm just going by the smell. When I was in high school, though, they did say, the guys would say, if you're not man enough to swallow, you're not man enough to chew. So most of the guys at my high school, they just, huh?
I said had ulcers.
Yeah. Speaking of chewing, I moved to Arkansas when I was a sophomore in high school, and they permitted whoever wanted to chew at school. And most of those boys down there, and some of the girls, they chewed like plug tobacco or leaf tobacco. Right? The skull and Copenhagen, that kind of thing, wasn't even, they didn't even think of it, or I don't know, nobody used it. They always used, plug tobacco. And so the downside to that is that wherever you went around school, there was pop bottles that were, half full of tobacco, nasty. Well, I knew I would get in serious trouble if I were to chew tobacco. My folks would find out I'd be in trouble. But it was the thing. I mean, everybody was chewing tobacco. Well, one day I was at the store, and here was this really strong black licorice. And I'm like, that smells just like it. So I bought it. I'm at my grandparents' house. I'm out in the yard. Oh, it looks just like it too. Smells just like it, looks just like it. I'm like, I will be in tomorrow. So, especially at PE, weightlifting, everybody had, So I got this big old wad of licorice in my mouth, and everybody, and I was actually pretty good at it, I could get a long one going out there. So then after class, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, here's the thing. If you can't chew tobacco because your folks said it's wrong, then to chew, if you're going to pretend to chew tobacco, isn't that just as wrong? And if that is why you're not supposed to chew tobacco because it's wrong, because your folks told you not to, and the guys in the weight class discover that you're faking it by chewing licorice, then they're going to ridicule you way more than if you don't chew at all. So here's my point. I was visiting my grandparents for about 3 months, going to school down there. My folks were in Oregon, I was in Arkansas. My folks weren't going to find out. My grandparents probably wouldn't find out either. But I was 15 years old, and I had a moral warehouse that was able to sort through all that and come to the conclusion the right thing is not to fake it. Right? If you would be being disobedient to your parents to to chew tobacco, then to fake chewing tobacco is just going to be, yeah, not just as bad, but it's going to get you in just as much trouble or make you be a fool in front of the other guys. So
Yeah, but you know, even though you were still doing that, the other people don't know that you were doing it. You know, so what was the difference, anyways? You know,
yeah,
like
so
everybody would just think you're, yeah.
anyway, I had that whole process. I went to the counter of my moral warehouse, and I asked the question, and the little jitney went and found the moral principles to apply to that, so that I could make that moral choice, and I'm glad for that.
Glad the guys didn't find out.
So the interrupt rule. Describe to me the interrupt rule.
Just like what the structure of it is, I guess.
Yeah.
So where the child puts their hand on your arm, and then you put yours over theirs to tell them, yes, I heard you. Just wait a second. Are you talking about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is for when you're engaged in a conversation with someone else. The child should not interrupt. How's that going? Did you teach it to your kids?
I actually, before we even did this, I had told Rowan that like a few months back. I had just thought of doing that because he was always interrupting, and so we've been working with that with him. But then I had just, before I even learned it in here, I was like, Rowan, how about you on my leg or on my arm, and then I will know that. I think I was going to coffee with a friend, and I was like, I knew he was gonna be kind of, so I was like, if you need to tell me something, instead of interrupting, just put your hand on my leg or whatever, and then I will do it back to let you know I heard you, and then just I'll wait for a break. And exactly what it was saying to do. So
Cool.
and he did, and it worked out
It
great.
was on the episode of Bluey too.
Oh yeah, yes, it was.
On the episode of what?
Bluey, the little cartoon.
Oh.
It's a really good show.
Little blue healers. Yeah.
So what were you gonna tell about your kid? I thought you raised your hand.
No.
Oh.
No, my sister told me to do that before taking the class. Yeah, he's just at a very like impulsive age, so we're working on it. And it's hard because it's the worst, I would say, in the car, because he's like, mom, 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 and I'm like, I can't he can't reach me, and so I stop and I say, you need to wait, mommy and dad are talking, and then he usually sometimes does, but most of the time he doesn't. So that's when we struggle, is the car. But sometimes in person. But usually if it's in person, we can like see each other, and he's like, okay, I get it.
So here's something interesting. You're on the phone or you're talking, and the baby catches on fire in the other room. And so your kid comes in and quietly places his hand on your knee. And you're like, yes. Okay, so when we're teaching these principles, we have to teach the exception to the rule as well. The exception to the rule is, if there's an emergency, come put your hand on my leg and say, Mom, it's an emergency. Dad, the baby's on fire. Whatever it is. So I guess I think that these are very important to teach our kids, but we at the same time have to teach them the exception, because otherwise this becomes legalistic and rigid, and our kids will resent it. But when you teach it in a way that is reasonable and you teach the exception, then your kids feel like it's like you're a balanced person. Now, when you do teach the exception and when you do try to be balanced, your kids will test it. And that's when you say, you know what? I know what you're doing. It's not an emergency and you're just interrupting. I said no. Bang. That's it, right? So remember this one thing, that when we tell our kids to do something and we've taught them and we know that they know, then when they don't, the world's got to stop turning until they do. And once we have that attitude, you'll be amazed how fast children begin to obey, because they know that they know that it's not unreasonable for you to expect them to obey. And they know what the difference is between an exception and the rules. All right. So the interrupt rule is about respect and courtesy. So again, we want to teach to the moral reason why and allow them to understand that this is how you demonstrate courtesy. Okay, so a child learns to blank the parent that his or her needs will be met in an orderly way. Trust. Okay. Yeah, man, I just have so much bonus material tonight. But here's a big question. Are you trustworthy? Do your kids know that you mean what you say, and that you say what you mean, and that if they put their hand and you put your hand on theirs, that you really will take the next opportunity to allow them to speak? Or do they like, no, they won't. They're going to just keep on talking on the phone, or they're going to keep on whatever. So it's a big deal to be trustworthy. Okay, the child learns to trust the parent that his or her needs will be met in an orderly way. And this interrupt rule helps the child to gain self-discipline of patience. It reinforces the positive side of the child's conscience. Thus, confirmation comes from within the heart of the child as well as from without. It communicates to the third party involved the standards of respect and honor as a what?
Family.
What is it?
Family.
As a family, or living by, that you as a family are living by. And when you honor age, you honor God. So that's cool. So push your chair in when leaving the table. Honor visiting guests in your home by teaching your children to stand when they come into the room. Yeah. And especially if they are watching television, or they're playing video games, or they're on their phone, it's common courtesy, only it's not common anymore, but it should be. It's courtesy to pause the movie, pause the game, set the phone down, and just simply stand. If spoken to, hello, thank you, glad you're here. Now you could go back to whatever it was. Here's the question though. Do we demonstrate that? Oh, I'm like, wow. Not that pushing in the chair is legalistic law, but it is courtesy to mom. You know, how about taking your dishes to the sink or whatever, to the dishwasher? How about not leaving your dishes in the TV room? I looked up this morning. There's no kids that live here, so those would be my dishes. Again, we have the opportunity to demonstrate and respect, and then we can expect that our children will emulate it. All right. So how does this go at your house? Why are parents not to wait until their child develops a comprehensive knowledge of biblical virtues before requiring right behavior? I'm on page 105. Why should you require?
On that question.
What's that?
I was confused on how to answer that question.
All right. Anybody else want to take a shot at it?
Over there, I can really get a grasp all the other stuff first. This is kind of foundation first.
Right.
And we put children easily. Then, as their ability to understand grows, we can teach them the moral reason why, but we need them in the meantime.
Okay. Those are. So we want to begin to teach our children to conduct themselves the way they ought to, even if they don't understand the ought to. And remember this control, relationship control. So since Morgan's not here, I can use her as an example. The other day, she was at our house, and she told her little girl, who's 2, going on 17, come over here and put your coat on, we're about to go. And Georgia was just kind of like, yeah, she didn't say, she just didn't do it. So then Morgan said, what's the right answer? And now the little girl looks at her with some, and mom said, yes, Mom. And the little girl went, yes, Mom. Not come to put her coat on. So then Morgan was going to spank her for disobedience, which would have probably been fine. But I'm observing it, and I didn't want her to get spanked because of Grandpa, you know. And so I just said, Morgan, just take a hold of her and put her coat on her. And the reason I said that is because I didn't want to see her get spanked. But also because she's 2. Control. Comprehension, relationship. Did she comprehend what she was supposed to do? Yes, she did. But there would not have been a conflict and walked over and took her by the hand and said, okay, we're going to put your coat on you now, and had her by the hand and took her over and put her coat on her. Then there would have been no contest.
What if there was?
Then there could be a spanking, right? If she arched her back and fell on the floor or whatever.
Right.
Okay. And at 2 they will. Sometimes.
Dead weight.
But there could have been a whole lot less conflict and disobedience if there would have been no directive given. Instead of giving a directive, just come over and just grab her by the hand and say, I'm going to put your coat on you now. And just put it on her. Right? And I know why. It's because you're tired. And it's like, they're over there. Come over here where I am and put their coat on. Right? But you have to ask yourself this question. If I give this directive and they don't do it, is that going to be more work than if I don't give the directive and I just get up and grab them by the hand and bring them over and say, we're going to put your coat on you. Boom. Does that make sense? When they're 2. Now, as they're 3 and 4, relationship comprehension grows. Control's probably still out here though. But 5, 6, being, I mean, I'm talking about control, physical. You sit in this chair and we're, that kind of control. Lessons and relationship increases. But and there's still so little, well, same little girl was at our house, and I was trying to get her to do something, and she fell on the floor and was like, whoa, fell on the floor. That was pretty, no, why is she doing that? But I know she's been in our house a long time. She probably should have had her nap an hour ago or more. It's wrong for her to be doing that. But I'm not going to have a come to Jesus moment with her at this juncture, because if I do, I'm going to have to win. And I don't think that I'm really going to spank my grandkids unless they're left with me for days on end, But if their mom's there, I'm not going to spank them. And her mom was there. So I resorted to something different. I said, till she was wondering, what's Grandpa doing? I'm just standing there. Well, you were there for this, weren't you?
I think so.
Yeah. So then I decided that distraction was going to be my tactic. So rather than confronting her on her behavior, I decided to distract her from her behavior. And so what I did then is said, I'm going to get you. Boom! Tickle her, right? And now she's laughing, but she's still wanting to throw a fit a little bit. And then I tried this. I bet you can't look right at me without smiling. Okay, I use this with my a lot. And so she looks at me. I'm looking at, and then she smiles. That don't seem like a big deal, but I'm winning. Every time she smiles, so I'm persisting in winning. And as she keeps grinning and whatever, she's losing her ambition to throw a fit. And then all of a sudden she just got up and was sweet. That's a tactic. It spared me having to have a knockdown drag out with her, right? Okay, a couple days ago she was over, and so gave her milk in a cup, a sippy cup. And she's like, I want the Mickey Mouse cup or whatever. She wanted a different cup. It's like, you don't get to choose which cup you have. We just put it in this cup for you, drink it, So her mom and dad, it's at the dinner table, and it's uncomfortable for everyone because just behave yourself, right? So about bacon is what I do, baker. So I I take it and I just put it down like this. And she goes, I said, "We didn't enjoy this at all." She's smart enough to figure that out. And she's like, "Okay, Papa." Gave it back to her. That was the end of the fight over which cup it was. So that's another tactic that I've used with my kids a lot. If they're going to fuss about whatever it is, then nothing is like, if that, then how about nothing? So then their alternative is to decide, well, I would like this. So now I'm going to settle for what I've been given. And that teaches to decide to be content. So I'm not trying to tell you because I'm not. There's plenty of times I couldn't figure out what in the world to do with kids. But is that there's other methods and means other than spanking that are effective, and that also saves spanking for really, that's a big deal. So, when your kid's 2, spankings aren't that big a deal. But the older your kid gets, the bigger deal spanking is. And by the time your kid's 6 or 7 years on obedience from the time they're little, they shouldn't even have to be spanked. Not that they couldn't be, but they shouldn't have to be. Because relationship and understanding is growing. Control is lessening. That makes sense? So here's what I recommend. How can I be smarter than this kid? Right? So, I mean, literally, sometimes with my kids, there really is a fly in front of me. I'm not going nuts. Literally with my kids, sometimes I would just stop and just think. Sometimes I would even stop and just pray and be like, God, what? And you'll be amazed how much of an impact that has on your kids. When they see that you've just stopped and you're going, what do I need to do to get through to this child's heart? Your kids will be like, ooh, look out. Dad's in his thinking mode. Something's about to go down, So, I'll talk about this again throughout this whole parenting time. But one more thing I want to recommend. Do not fight with your children. So, do you know what I'm talking about? When it's like, no, and then pretty soon, right? You're fighting with them. And I probably shouldn't say this. Might sound like a sexist, but typically moms fight with their kids and dads, and I think that's because they're with them more and they're just worn down. But here's what I want to recommend: that you're fighting with your kid is just stop and just look at them and think with you about this. You don't even have to say it. Just look at them and you are going You're not saying it out loud, but you're thinking it. And I am not going to fight with you because I am the mom. When you adopt that attitude, all of a sudden the kid's like, okay. Sometimes you don't even have to do anything else. It's just the fact that you stopped and you started to consider, what do I need to do? I will not fight with this child. It's amazing what happens when you do that. So next time, of course yours are a little tiny baby, but yours is big enough to start to fight with, and yours are, and yours are, and there's that.
That is exactly what I've tried lately, and it does work.
Yeah.
It just stops. Or kind of confused, like, why are we? Oh, okay, yeah. It's like a brain glitch. It's pretty amazing.
Because it can start happening before you even. I'm in the middle of this. Why? I just need to stop. I'm the parent. They wrap me into it.
Even think, stop, think, organize, proceed.
Pick your battle.
You use that for stop. I'm gonna think about what I need to do. I'm gonna organize my actions, and then I'm gonna execute. I mean, proceed. All right. Anybody want respect for elders? How have you talked to your kids about it?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely talked about it, but I mean, when you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, you know, I guess nobody ever, we just did, I guess, like, with my grandpa and my Mima, like, up from what we were doing, just say hi, shake somebody's hand, but it has seemed like nobody really, I mean, there's still people that do it, but rarely. So, I mean,
It was just kind of natural. He's probably excited to see him too.
Here's a question. How do your kids respond to a compliment, particularly from a stranger? How do kids respond?
thank you.
I get excited.
Say thank you.
I like your shoes.
Thank you. You should see my skateboard.
Yeah.
So sometimes kids need to be taught the appropriate thing to say, and thank you is the thing to say almost in any situation. How fast were you going? Thank you. When in doubt, say thank you. It's just a nice thing to say. And it works in almost every situation.
Your seatbelt. Oh, thank you.
I'm going to write you a fine for. Thank you.
Come on.
How about at your house when you were growing up? Who fought with you more, your mom or your dad?
Oh, probably mom. You know.
Probably mom.
I mean, I don't know that we really. I would say that they implemented that pretty well. Like, there was no. Like, if we started to talk back, then the conversation immediately became about us talking back. Like, everything else, it didn't matter what was in trouble with before. Now you're talking back and you're in trouble for that. Like, it. So.
Right. Your folks implemented a lot of this. I think they took that early on in your childhood.
Yeah, I didn't even know how much was implemented until I was like, yeah, oh, well, that makes sense.
That's probably pretty cool though to see, you know, like you growing up and then now you're seeing all the stuff. It's probably pretty cool.
See all their strategies.
Yeah, like, alright, mama.
Yeah, most of the time it pops up like when I'm watching the videos, and they'll be like, "Well, kids these days," and then
Yeah.
I think about, well, my parents took this, so you were talking about the next kids these days.
Yeah.
You don't even know.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you? What? I'm talking to the guys. What were your dads like? Did you feel like that you were always within the possibility that you could get a whooping? To what age?
18?
Do your yeah? No,
No.
but you mostly grew up with your mom, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't really get whippings when I probably should have, for sure.
Even when I thought that I could probably take my dad, I knew that I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be able to bear the pain of that, the shame of that. So instead, I thought, well, if the possibility is that I could still get a whipping, I'm just not going to do whatever it is that would cause that to happen, because it would just be too tragic. But I remember when I was 15, my mom got mad at me and was giving me a whooping. And if you know Grandma Joe, she's such a sweet little lady, right? But when she would get mad, oh my goodness, I can remember my dad being like, Joe, Josephine, Mildred Josephine, because she'd be wah, 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 giving us a spanking, and he would call her on it. But when I was 15, she got really upset with me about something, and she just started giving me a whipping with a belt. And I finally, I just, I couldn't stop myself, and I grabbed a hold of the belt, and I said, Mom, I know you're mad, but I said, I don't have the internal fortitude to just whipping from you. And so please, if I need a whipping, let me do it. I just can't. Right? Anyway, that was the last time she tried to give me a whipping. But my mom and my dad said, we were parenting training, we avoid in the later years. Grandpa Otis was always a tough guy. Even when he was old. I think about it, it's like, my fighting days are pretty well behind me. I'm not going to get it. I'm going to diplomacy. Not so much, Grandpa Otis. I might be 75, but I'll take you. Oh, man.
Still blows my mind you guys would go out there and get those horses, like wild horses and stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Well, the thing
that's
is,
told me lots of cool stories.
my dad really was a tough guy. He did a lot of tough guy stuff. But
That's pretty tough. You go catch a wild horse.
Break
Good
a-
luck.
break
Yeah.
a wild horse.
I'd like to see it.
we went and got a wild stallion one time out at the ranch. This rancher had a wild horse herd. It wasn't government horses; they were his horses, but they had been wild for generations. And every year he would open his corral and bait the horses in with hay in the wintertime, and then he would shut the gate and he'd sort out the ones he wanted to sell. So we went out there and we bought this little stallion from him. Well, little, he was probably 15 hands, but he was like a 2-year-old. Wild as could be. So Dad roped him,
Got a hold?
tied him up to the fence, a post, and got a halter on him. And then we got him in the back. Dad didn't have a starter. Horses in the back of a pickup with sideboards. So we get this horse in the back of the pickup and tied his head down the bed of the truck. So we get on the way, goes by, scares this horse so bad, he's having a fit in the back of the truck, the roof of the pickup.
Oh.
So we get pulled over, and his head's tied down, his foot's up on the top of the truck, right? So my dad jumps up on the roof of the truck and is trying to put this horse's foot back over the sideboard into the pickup bed, but he can't do it because, you know, the horse weighs 900 pounds. He can't pick that horse's foot up. So then he tells me, he says, "Okay, you're gonna have to loosen the rope." I'm thinking, Dad, this horse is gonna get out on the freeway. Somebody's gonna get killed. So anyway, I had to lose the rope. But what we did is he says, take a couple dollies around the sideboards, and then you'll have the advantage on the horse. You can just leave it in. So he stood on the roof until I let out enough slack that he could get the foot back in the back of the pickup, and then he gets out there and got in, drove him the rest of the way to the corral at home.
Amazing.
Horses probably basically came by the time he got there, so worn out, traumatized. It's like, I surrender.
Some sleep in the back.
I was trying to remember what that rancher's name was. But Dad bought several horses from him. We got this one mare, we were putting her in the back of the pickup, and she just fell down and sold up and wouldn't get up. But her butt was still this far out of the pickup. And so we were like, we can't. But the thing is, there was nothing wrong with her, and she could at any moment just jump up and start kicking the slats out of everything, right? So we're like, getting a stick and trying to push on her, trying to get her to get up and get it. Finally, she wouldn't get up, so Dad goes, okay, we're going to have to just push her into the truck. So he said, I'll get on the leg side, so if she starts kicking, you won't get kicked. But you get on the tail side, and we're going to have to. And so she was probably a yearling, so she probably weighed pounds. And we're just, finally we get her in enough that we could shut the tailgate. He tied her down. We got into our corral, still laying down. And so he tries to get her up. She won't get up. And so he said, well, I'm going to go to the neighbor's hot shot. Anyway, while he was gone, she got up and jumped out. We were in the corral. The truck was back in the corral. Anyway, she got out while he was gone, and we didn't have to cattle prod her. Anybody else want to talk about your kids?
He sure is cute.
All right. Anybody seeing any changes in your kids yet? After just these few weeks that we've been introducing concepts to them?
I think Rowan's been doing good.
Well, we're about to get into introducing more concepts to them. So far it's kind of been teaching parents,
Yeah.
but now it's going to launch into more concepts.
This last week I've kind of given up on the spanking situation at bed. It's definitely not doing anything. Or two into his bedroom, and I just take his toys, which is seeming to really infuriate him, which in turn is working. So
It's not funny.
Because he doesn't want to lose his toys at night. Yeah, that's a good idea. Good
doesn't want to
tactic.
lose his toys. He doesn't care about the spanking. He'll just look at me and laugh. Oh man.
He does not look at you and laugh.
No, he cries, but then he gets right back up. Ready for another.
Thank you, sir.
But yeah, he doesn't like losing those toys.
There you go. You thought it through and said there's got to be another way.
It was mostly her.
I was like,
dead
I
set on
cannot
doing
do this
spanking.
anymore. I was like, it's obviously not working. And he was like, oh.
When it
I've been trying to like,
I I got whooped good. I mean, that was my thing. Yeah.
I did not.
When my grandparents to this day still have like kind of an ongoing joke. It's like I got my hourly spanking.
Just get up in the morning and give you a spanking just to get ahead of the
Yeah,
thing, right?
literally.
That's pretty much how I roll. But so I just assume.
When we get to the chapter on discipline, on corporal punishment, I'm going to give you a real detailed explanation of how I think you should spank a kid so that it's effective. And I'm not saying it's the only right way. I'm just saying it's a way that I found that was effective.
You know, Rowan, when we spank him, you know, we calmly take him into the other room, explain why, you know, and give him a spanking, and then after that, you know, he cries and it makes us want to cry, but he will want to give you a hug after. You know, he wants.
That's really key. That's key.
Which, you know, a couple times when I had, you know, given him a spanking in the past, he would run, you know, but now we do it in a way where, like, he wants us to hold him after.
He runs to you rather than away from you.
Yeah, we tell
Right.
him,
Right.
come give us a hug now. And
Yeah,
it'll be okay.
that's an important thing. But I won't get into it early. But I applaud you for finding other ways of dealing, you know, getting your kids' attention. Because really, what we're really wanting is for our child's heart to come into alignment. And however we can get it to.
I mean, there was definitely a night in there where he ended up with no toys, and then it was a lost cause. Because then he just got up just like if I would have whooped him many times. But eventually he ran out of his toys, and he didn't have anything else to lose. So.
So you bring them all back in. Okay, we're starting over.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Well, it's really hard because I wasn't raised with spankings, so it's like his view and mine are like all the time. Because I'm always like, okay, there's another way.
She's all about the conversation. I am not.
Well, he gets it. Anyway. So
Well, you know, that's typical between mom and dad. But as long as that discussion takes place not in front of the kid. And what I find is my wife pretty I'm just saying she's pretty smart. And you know, I raised her from a child. And but the first time I preached at her church, I was 19 and I was, you know, looking for a wife. I was 9. Well, I was looking over here in the youth section and should have been looking in the children's room. Had to wait for her to grow up. All right. Well, if you broadcast, turn off the broadcast and we'll get into the real nitty gritty.
I didn't know you had preached at her church when she was